Did you know there are many ghouls that are hundreds of years old? Just how many are there? I'm Mark from Digital Dissection, and today we're looking at 9 ghouls in the Fallout universe who have been around for an incredibly long time. Ghoulification is one of the more interesting concepts within the Fallout universe. Beings who mutated due to intense exposure to radiation, experiencing what looks like rotting skin, but incredibly durable healing properties, alongside one important detail: prolonged life, far beyond human expectancy. And several examples exist that show ghouls have some considerable staying power. This list may also be hard to pin down in exact order, but we'll do our best to estimate based on earliest known origins at the time of a character's appearance, and you can let us know in the comments if you agree. It's understandable that you might find it odd to say someone is over 200 years old, yet still call them a child. Billy Peabody is perhaps one of the more curious cases of ghoulification found across the entire Fallout universe, as he endured the entire process in one of the worst ways possible. When the bombs fell on October 23, 2077, Billy was unfortunately away from his home of Quincy within the Boston Commonwealth. Seeing no way to get home in time, Billy sought the only refuge available to him, a refrigerator. But once it closed, he had no way to get back out, as it had no release mechanism from the inside. By the time of Fallout 4's events, this means that Billy spent 210 years inside the refrigerator, relying only on his exposed radiation and very little food as a means of keeping his body alive. What this does is place his age, however, near 220 years. When factoring his age at the moment he was locked in, it is worth noting that Billy's parents, Carol and Matt, also survived the Great War, becoming ghouls themselves, and the entire family can be reunited after saving Billy. This would put his parents' age at least near around 240 years old at minimum, and while we're not focusing on them specifically, their longevity is also worth pointing out. Regardless, it makes Billy a unique circumstance, as ghouls are sterile and can't have children, and his growth being halted by ghoulification should prove that more childlike ghouls could be out there. What doesn't make much sense is how he managed to stay sane this entire time, but fortunately, he avoided becoming feral. Dean Domino, also known as Mr. Yesterday and the King of Swing, is a pre-war singer and performer trapped in the Sierra Madre of New Vegas' Dead Money DLC. The world-traveling singer accepted an invite from the pre-war casino resort from its founder, Frederick Sinclair. The Sierra Madre went on lockdown as the bombs fell, initiating an intense security protocol, just moments before Domino's last performance at the Tampico Theater on its grounds. Domino, who had long sought payback on Sinclair for bruising his ego, spent hundreds of years seeking a supposed treasure contained within the resort's vault. Domino would remain motivated in his obsession to find the vault's contents by mapping the resort's extensive security measures. Domino's age during the events of New Vegas places him at minimum around 211 years old, and possibly much older depending on when his performing career began, putting him in the same estimate as Billy Peabody's parents potentially, but we're not entirely sure. John Elwood isn't a ghoul you admittedly get to interact with that much, but he's the director of Cambridge Polymer Labs and operated the pre-war organization and defense contractor with his wife Erica and former classmate Wilfred Bergman. As the bombs fell, Elwood received word from his military connections that they should continue working on technology for the US military, or face the repercussions of abandoning their contracts. Elwood's solution was to deceive his employees, seal the Cambridge Polymers building, and hopefully survive the Commonwealth's radiation. An internal battle with Cambridge Polymers between John and Wilfred led to Erica losing her life, and eventually causing John to lock himself within his office. Radiation leaked into the building despite mitigation efforts, and by the events of Fallout 4, Elwood is a feral ghoul with no one to blame but himself. What we do know is that John, Erica, and Wilfred formed Cambridge Polymers shortly after their college days with the Institute, making Elwood at minimum 220 years old, with the possibility of being anywhere from 240 to 245. Fallout 3's location of Underworld is a ghoul city built in the ruins of the Museum of History, and features a unique hotel and restaurant called Carol's Place. Carol's story actually begins in 2051, and she was already in her mid-20s during the events of the Great War. Her family didn't have access to the vault network within the Capital Wasteland, but they did have a public shelter as a primary plan. Carol's father, however, kept its doors open too long to assist a family still trying to seek refuge as the bombs hit DC. Within moments, a great flash of white light occurred, burning her dad's figure into the wall and knocking Carol unconscious. When she emerged to find the ruins of Washington, D.C., the Museum of History became a suitable hiding spot from the horrors of the wasteland. Carol will retell the player character aspects of these earliest days, but even 200 years after, the psychological effects still take a toll on her. In time, Underworld began to be a safe haven for the area's ghouls, as more survivors found the location, each succumbing to ghoulification over time. Around 2217, Greta would arrive at the settlement, forming a relationship with Carol, and they'd be together ever since, operating Carol's place. She would also go on to adopt Job, a bartender in Megaton, and while it's unknown just how far apart they are in age, she maintains a parental dynamic with him. We rank Carol higher on our list based on the fact that we can confirm the dates of her pre-war life, unlike some of the previous examples. If you didn't have gunslinger turned mechanic on your bingo card, then you'll likely be surprised by Raul Tejada. Raul's story begins on his family compound outside of Mexico City, called the Hidalgo Ranch. It was here that Raul learned a considerable amount about firing guns and repairing broken machinery. Raul wasn't exactly a troubled youth, but occasionally got in trouble with local police. The Great War didn't initially impact Raul's family, as the bombs hit Mexico City directly, but no harm immediately came to their ranch. This would soon change, as refugees from the city soon discovered the ranch, and the Tejada family did their best to aid them, but eventually ran out of supplies and began turning travelers away. One evening, 24 pillagers took issue with the newfound lack of hospitality, set fire to the ranch, and only Raul and his younger sister Rafaela survived, but just barely. Raul was able to dispatch many of the attackers due to his gun skills, but not all of them. After a local bounty was placed on Raul, him and Rafaela fled to what remained of Mexico City, living as scavengers in the ruins, and with little education about the effects of radiation poisoning, began suffering skin burns. After finding a vaquero outfit that highly entertained his sister, Raul became known as the Ghost of Mexico City, a highly skilled gunslinger who bested every challenger, but due to his radiation exposure, he would eventually fall ill, and Rafaela had no choice but to scavenge for resources in his place. Rafaela would be murdered by raiders, causing Raul to investigate her absence, and in a rage after discovering her remains, killed all the remaining people responsible. Raul would face more tragedy in his life exploring the American Southwest, losing more friends to senseless violence, but he would eventually settle down outside New Vegas, tinkering with machinery and playing with radios. He may be a tired ghoul when he's finally encountered by the player character, but still retains a sense of humanity, despite seeing positivity in how Caesar's Legion brought order to tribes of the area. What we can confirm is that Raul has been alive since 2047, and to survive over 230 years, he resorts to self-deprecating humor, is well aware of his age, but still retains a sweet tooth, scavenging anything sugary that he might come across, to further rot what's left of his teeth anyway. One of the player's earliest interactions in Fallout 4 is with the Vault Tech representative, a door-to-door salesman attempting to sell vault space to Commonwealth citizens. Just before the bombs fell, he's making his rounds in Sanctuary Hills, but like many who heard the air sirens that day, he's stuck being held outside of Vault 111's gate by armed forces. The representative, despite his affiliation with Vault-Tec, is denied entry, and like many of the Soul Survivors' neighbors, becomes a ghoul when the bombs strike Boston. In the wake of the Great War, the rep stays in Sanctuary for a time, but faced discrimination in Diamond City and surrounding communities before making his way to Good Neighbor. We do have some data, however, about his age and how old he could possibly be. Before the bombs fell, he's already been a Vault-Tec employee for roughly 20 years. His known timeline, however, puts him in a similar tenure as Billy Peabody's parents as a survivor. And given how long this was before he became a Vault-Tec representative, could put him well over 240 plus years old by the time he's encountered by the sole survivor in 2287. While plenty of crime occurs throughout the Fallout universe, organized gangsters like Eddie Winter are still pretty unique. The violent and capable Winter operated a powerful Irish gang in Boston before the Great War. Shortly before the bombs fell, Winter was the target of a massive police effort called Operation Winter's End, and the task force gained significant ground in proving several of his crimes. This meant uncovering his full criminal network, a litany of petty crimes, robberies, and felonies involving hired assassinations. This stretched as far as the death of lead investigator Nick Valentine's fiancée, Jennifer Lands, gunned down near one of Winter's sandwich shops, in which Winter himself was likely the gunman. After making a plea deal with Boston's police, Winter paid a doctor to perform experimental treatments on him to effectively turn him into a ghoul. Winter, despite the investigation, still had tremendous influence, and through his connections learned that nuclear war was inevitable. His plan was to wait out the results in an underground bunker until a day would be appropriate to rebuild his criminal empire. The timing of his ghoulification puts him as potentially one of the earliest known ghouls in the Fallout timeline, and putting him near 240 to 250 years old. Cooper Howard, aka the Ghoul, is one of 3 main characters in Fallout's first season on Amazon Prime. The actor and husband to a high-ranking Vault-Tec official is an Army veteran and relatively wholesome celebrity as a star of several Western films. When the bombs fell in 2077, however, Howard was separated from his wife Barb and witnessed the explosions with his own eyes. As of this video, we don't quite know what happened next, but Howard eventually becomes a ghoul at some point, and a feared bounty hunter by 2296. Due to what we can assume about his age, this could easily place him in the range of 250 to 260 years old. What we don't quite know is if he became ghoulified immediately near 2077, or if it happened later in his life. What's very clear is that his ghoulification has been aided by an as-of-yet unknown drug, and the ghoul can endure an intense amount of damage alongside an incredibly high skill with firearms. He'd be easily one of the oldest ghouls in the entire Fallout property, but there's one frontrunner who actually predates even him. One of Fallout's possible oldest ghouls and living beings could be Desmond Lockhart, who was first encountered in Fallout 3's Point Lookout DLC. Lockhart's full origin story isn't entirely understood, but before the Great War, he was a foreign intelligence official, according to the Fallout 3 official game guide. It's not entirely known which country's interests he necessarily represented, but based on his speech patterns, he's either British or had close ties with the northeastern United States. In the years before the war, Lockhart and many others began placing their bets on how to live beyond the normal constraints of human life expectancy. Many of these concepts became used throughout the series, which includes the forced evolutionary virus, cryogenic stasis, and even AI consciousness. Lockhart put his investment into radiation exposure and paid for highly experimental treatments. What makes him unique as a Fallout ghoul is that despite his condition, he represents an incredibly specific number who kept their natural hair. The previously mentioned Raul Tejada is one example, as well as Snowflake of Fallout 3's Underworld. Lockhart's existence, however, is mired by the fact that he still retains pre-war paranoia from his time working with international intelligence matters. According to him, his existence is a threat to those who might know that he's still alive, and if he survives the events of Point Lookout, he plans to pursue those who would want him dead. It would seem that even as the Great War destroyed the planet, old world vendettas and rivalries still dominate Lockhart's motivations. In his mind, it's kill or be killed, and the tactic at least seems to be working out for him, as Lockhart has been alive since at least 2027, and is well over 250 years old when he meets the player character. And with that, we've looked at 9 ghouls in the Fallout universe that have stood the test of time. Were there any ghouls that we missed? Let us know in the comments. And for content just like this video, check out the full playlist of Fallout stories linked here. And until next time, pop culture nerds, keep on dissecting.